everyone. Today we are going to talk about W-4 forms. If you hold a job or you've held a job in the past, you very likely filled out a W-4 form. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about kind of what W-4 forms are, and we're going to go through how to fill out a W-4 form in case that you've never filled one out before, or maybe you've even filled one out before but you weren't exactly sure what you were all filling in. So we'll go over that process to make sure we are all on the same page. This picture here, this is what a W-4 form looks like. It's actually a little bit longer because there is a back side to it, but we will talk about that once we get there. So when you start a new job, you're likely going to complete something called an I-9 form first. This just is a form that proves that you are legally allowed to work in the U.S. That's an I-9 form. After that, you'll need to complete what we call a W-4 form. We're going to watch a quick video to learn more, and then we're going to answer some questions below. I really like this video. I think it's pretty informative. So let's go ahead and take a peek at that video, then we'll return and answer these questions. So I believe I have it pulled up here. Let's see. Make it big. There we go. All right, here's the video.
Here's your paycheck.
Oh, yeah, my first paycheck. All right. What the? I earned $2,100, but I'm only taking home $1,600. What gives?
Yeah, I get that a lot. You're expecting something a little bigger, huh?
What? Who's talking?
It's me, down here.
Huh?
There's a reason your take-home pay isn't higher. Taxes.
Man, I hate taxes.
Hold on there, big guy. Just like I'm your income, taxes make up the government's income. Without taxes, our government couldn't provide services that people want and need.
Yeah, but where do all my taxes go?
Funny you should ask. If you got a minute, I'll tell you the story of your federal taxes.
Yeah, geez, sounds thrilling. But bummer, I've got that combo colonoscopy root canal.
Sit down and listen. Did you know that the U.S. federal budget is more than $3 trillion? How the government raises the funds to pay the bills and thinks about spending affects you directly. Let's start by looking at my stub.
Okay.
First, here's your FICA, or payroll taxes. They're collected from both you and your employer, and they pay for things like earned benefits. They flow into a pot of money called trust funds. Now, let's look at your federal income taxes. They go into a much larger pot of money called the federal fund. Between your FICA taxes and income taxes, folks like you are the government's main bill payers. Now let's talk about borrowing. When the government spends more than it takes in, it has to borrow. Borrowing, the deficit, is larger when the economy is bad. More people are unemployed and paying fewer taxes, and there's more need for government services. Borrowed money contributes to the federal fund as well. That's the government's income in a nutshell.
But what does all that money buy?
Now, my friend, that's the trillion-dollar question. In 2013, the government will spend more than $3.7 trillion broken out into three chunks: mandatory, discretionary, and interest on our national debt. Remember those FICA taxes you paid? They go to trust funds, which help pay for mandatory spending that's required by law. For example, Social Security and Medicare. Everyone over 62 is eligible for this support. A big portion of federal funds, that is your federal income taxes, goes to discretionary spending. Spending that happens at the discretion of the president and Congress every single year. One discretionary item, for example, is the military. 57% of all discretionary spending goes to fund the military. Now, look down here. 6% of discretionary spending goes to education for things like Head Start and community colleges and Pell Grants. Discretionary spending plus mandatory spending plus interest we have to pay on our national debt equal all federal spending. But the story doesn't end there. States and cities and towns count on a sizable chunk of this federal money. People like you also get money from the federal government when you need it, in the form of support like unemployment and disability insurance. In 2010, folks in Colorado received an average of $4,081 each. Any questions?
Yeah, but what does any of it do for me?
Really? Just a few things like making sure you breathe clean air and drink good water, making sure all people have access to affordable housing, funding for your favorite national park, cancer research, and elder services.
Huh.
Major debates are raging in Washington right now over tax policies. how to prioritize federal spending, how to deal with our nation's debt, and how to lower unemployment. This is where you come in. What are your priorities? You have the right and responsibility to get involved. Write a letter to the editor. Call your congressperson. Talk.
But I'm only taking home $1,600. What gives?
Yeah, I get that a lot.
Oops. Looks like it's done there. We got the main gist of it. So if we come back here and talk about W-4 forms, first off, what is the purpose of the W-4 form? Well, number one, let's just talk about when we use a W-4 form. Again, a W-4 form is a form that you fill out when you get a new job. Right? Fill out when you get a new job. The purpose of the W-4 is for you to fill out so your employer knows how much money they should pull out and put towards your taxes. So again, that's the big idea here. That's what a W-4 is. So let's go ahead and write that down. It might be helpful to take notes on this. A W-4 determines how much tax money, we'll say, tax money, your employer will take out of your paycheck. So when we file our taxes, right, in March or April, whenever you file your taxes, what you're doing is you're saying, is what I pulled or what my employer took out of my paycheck already, is that what I was legally required to pay in taxes? Or sometimes you might pay in too much to taxes. So that's when you get a refund when you file your taxes because you paid more than what was legally required of you. There's other times where you might have to pay into the government, meaning that your employer didn't withhold enough from your paycheck each month, so you have to pay a little bit more to get your legally required share. So again, the purpose of the W-4 is to hopefully get what you're legally required to pay and how much you actually pay into taxes over the year. Your goal is to get those two numbers the same, so that when you file your taxes, you don't neither have to pay in, nor do you really get a refund. You're hoping it's about the same. So that's the purpose of the W-4, and we'll talk about different features of the W-4 that impact how much money is going to be taken out of your paycheck for taxes each pay period. So here's a couple things. Another question says, all of the following options can be considered a dependent except... So when you're filing taxes, you can claim someone as a dependent, meaning they rely on you for living and health and things like that. So which of the following cannot be considered a dependent? Well, if we read through this, it says someone's child. Well, obviously someone's child is a dependent, so that's not it. A friend from school. And the third option is someone's nephew who's living with them full time. Well, option 3, they're still living with them full time, so they're relying on them for living. So that would be considered a dependent. Number 2, just a friend from school you cannot claim as a dependent. The reason why people claim dependents, or it's important to understand what a dependent is because if you have a dependent, a lot of times your taxes, how much you're legally required to pay in, is going to be less if you have a dependent. So sometimes on your W-4, you might indicate something like that because then they will take less out of your paycheck, knowing you're going to have to pay less into the tax system. Number 3, it says, why does the government take money out of your paycheck? Well, the big reason is to pay their bills. You may think, well, why would I want to pay the government bills? Well, the government's bills go to things that help us as well, right? They talked about how they use money for education, military. They put it towards things to make our water clean, our air clean, things like that. I'm just going to put natural parks. That was another one they talked about. But there's so many more, right? This is where that money goes from. It pays their bills, but their bills go towards things that also help us. So now let's go ahead and actually get into a W-4. Hopefully you can see this pretty well. If not, it might be helpful just to pull up a W-4. You could just Google a W-4 form and you might be able to see these lines a little bit clearer. But the first 4 lines are pretty simple, pretty self-explanatory. Line 1, you just put your full name and address, and that's kind of right in here on the W-4. On line 2, you write your social security number, so that's going to be right here. One thing I always tell students, if you don't have your social security number memorized, it would be a great time to do this because like I said, when you get a job, you're going to have to fill that out. Also, when you get into a more adult-like things, you're going to need your social security number quite a bit. So it's important that you have that memorized, but also you're not sharing that with other people, right? Because you don't want to get your identity stolen because you're letting your social security number get out to everybody. Line 3 here just is your marital status. So you just put, looks like I kind of wrote over it a little bit here. For box 3, you put single, married, or married but withhold at a higher single rate. So meaning you're going to file separately from your spouse. But for most of us, it's probably just going to be either single or married. That's what most people do. And then line 4 is complete only if your last name is different from what is on your social security card. So that would be just a checkbox if it is something different. Really, the only time that might happen, or the time that I often think of that might happen, is if maybe you just got married and you're changing your last name. Your last name on your social security card might be different than your current last name. Other things, if you're going through a divorce, I guess the same could also be true if you haven't switched back your name, and things like that. But again, box 4 is probably not one that many people would select, but it could be. So those are the first 4, just personal information, nothing too complicated. Line 5 through 7 is where you need to include the information that really matters. That's where your employer uses that to determine how much money is going to be withheld from your income for taxes. So just talking about 6 and 7 first, we're going to come back to 5 because 5 includes a little bit more information. But line 6, if I just read what we have here, it says line 6 is where you will claim an additional dollar amount that you want withheld. This can be because you expect a significant amount of income from an unusual source. That could be taxable alimony or an extra amount that you want withheld to cover taxes on a side business or an expected investment income. So 6 is where you would indicate you want more taxes or more money withheld for your taxes. And again, just to kind of sum up what this just said is the only reason you do that is if you know you have other income that is not already being taxed, and you want to make sure you set aside enough money for taxes so that when you come to file your taxes, you don't have to pay more money into the government. So for instance, maybe you work at CVS, right? And you fill out this W-4, but you have a side business where maybe you are, selling furniture, right? Furniture that you make. And that money right now you're not getting taxed on, but when you file your taxes, you have to claim that as income, so you know you have to pay taxes on that money. That's where you might put additional amount of money that you'd want withheld for taxes, just so you can cover the taxes that you know you're going to have to pay on that income. For most of us, and I know whenever I filled out a W-4, for line 6, I always put 0. I'd say when in doubt, put 0. I would guess that not many of us have any side businesses where we're getting a bunch of money from, so it's probably pretty safe to put 0 for line 6. Line 7 is where you would indicate that you want no income tax withheld. This could be because you earn below the amount that would be taxable. So I know in 2019, I think you had to make $12,200 to file taxes. If you made less than that, you did not have to file taxes. You can definitely still file taxes, but according to the law, you do not have to. So some people may think, gosh, I'm gonna work at this job part-time, only every other day for maybe just the summer, and I know I'm not gonna make that money. So for line 7, they might write exempt for this. But what I would say is I would always leave this blank, because if for some reason you did make over that $12,200 and you wrote exempt, when you go to file your taxes, you're gonna have to pay in quite a bit of money. Worst case scenario is if you don't put exempt here and you're paying in taxes, and then you find out at the end of the year that you've only made $8,000, when you go to file your taxes, you are going to get a return because you did not make enough to have to be paying into taxes. So you will be getting money back. And I think it's better to be safe than sorry when it comes to this line. So I always leave this line, you can just leave it blank. Again, if you didn't want to pay taxes on your income, you could put exempt. But again, you got to make sure that you'll be making under this amount in the year. And I would check, I think this is the same amount for this year as well, but it's always just good to double check on the IRS website. So that's line 6 and 7. Line 5 is probably the more complicated line. Line 5 is where you put down your number of allowances, and this is what the backside of a W-4 looks like. Allowances are things that are going to reduce the amount of money you have to pay in for taxes. So the reason why you would list your allowances is because then your employer will know, gosh, they're going to be having this many allowances, so they're going to pay less into taxes, so we're not going to take a lot out of their paycheck. So again, it's kind of, there's a personal preference. There's pros and cons to both. So I know I, for instance, a lot of times just put 0 for allowances, knowing that when I file my taxes, if I have allowances, I will get some sort of return in the end. A lot of people say it's better to indicate your allowances now so that your paychecks are higher, right? Because you're getting more, because they're not going to be setting aside a lot for taxes. They say if you get more in your paycheck, you got to be wise with that money, right? Maybe you can invest it or use it to pay off debt. However, I just sometimes worry if I put too many allowances on there, then I might have to pay in when I go to file my taxes. But again, it's kind of a personal preference. This allowance sheet kind of helps you determine how many allowances you should put on your W-4. And again, your employer takes that information and they use it to identify how much they should take out of your taxes. So here's what the backside of a W-4 looks like. And again, I would probably pull this up if it's kind of blurry. I know the screen is a little bit smaller for you guys. But down here, I just have the personal allowance worksheet explained. So line A is an easy one. It's just, you always enter 1 for yourself. So you put a 1 in there. So I'll kind of fill this in as I go. Let's see if I can make this a little bit smaller. Line B, it says enter another 1 if you're married, filing jointly. Don't if you're married, filing separately. So if you are not married, you would not enter a 1. So you could enter a 0 if you wanted, or you could just leave it blank. Line C says enter 1 if you're filing as head of household. So line C says head of household is if you are single, but with 1 or more eligible dependents. So if I have a kid or somebody that's living with me that I am providing for them financially, I would put a 1. That is not the case for me, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 0, because unfortunately dogs do not count. Line D is enter 1 if one of the 3 conditions apply. So it says you're single or married, filing separately, single or married, filing separately, or you have 1 job. You're married, filing jointly, have only 1 job, and your spouse doesn't work, or your wages from second job or your spouse's wages, or the total of both are $1,500 or less. So for me, I'm single and only have 1 job, so I'm going to go ahead and put a 1 here. Next is this child tax credit. So basically, if you fit into one of the first 3 income ranges listed, this can be an important source of allowances. So for me, though, I don't have any children, so that's an easy one for me to fill out. I'm just going to put 0. If you were to have a child, you'd have to read through those things to see if you qualify for any of them. F is a credit for dependents. This is where you can claim allowances for dependents, which could be a parent or other relation who qualifies as a dependent under the IRS regulation. So again, I would check the website to see what definitely qualifies as a dependent for sure. But for me, I don't have any dependents. Oops, sorry. So I'm going to go ahead and put another 0 here for F. G is other credits. This directs you to another worksheet. And if you wanted to, you could definitely go ahead and look at this worksheet. They always say though 0 is just a safe choice if you're not sure, and I just always put 0 for this one. Line H says add lines A through G and enter your total here. So it looks like I have a total of 2 allowances, and this is what I could, if I wanted to, I could go back and put this into line 5 of my actual W4 and call it a day. So if I go back to my W4 for line 5, I could put my number allowances as 2. Again, for me, I like to play things safe, and I always put 0 here. It doesn't hurt. It just means that they're going to take more out of my paychecks than may be necessary for taxes. But again, I like to make sure I have my bases covered so that I don't have to pay in when I file my taxes. I could have definitely put a 2 here because that's what the worksheet said, and it probably would have been fine. I probably would have gotten a little bit more in my paycheck. When I filed my taxes, it probably would have been right on. Again, that's kind of up to you though. When in doubt, I'd say put 0 for a 5 and 6 and leave 7 blank. So again, here's just a little intro to W4s. There's so many YouTube videos out there. If you're still confused, it'd be helpful to go look at them, because I guarantee at some point in your life, if you haven't already, you're going to be filling in one of these W4 forms. So it's important to be informed and understand how they work. This was today's assignment, just to watch this video. If you have any questions, as always, please email me at storeandflip@gmail.com. If not, have a great rest of your day.